Well, there have been mixed reactions on the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa's decision to reopen the local government elections candidate list registration process. This comes after the IEC briefed the media yesterday on the Constitutional Court's ruling to reject its application for a postponement of this year's local government elections. The IEC also denied the accusations that it was reopening the candidates list nomination process to accommodate the ANC after the party missed the deadline to register some of its candidates. It also announced that the voter registration weekend will be held on the 18th and 19th of this month. Well, to talk about the implications of the IEC's amended timetable, let's chat to Levy Ndou, who is a political analyst. Levy, always a pleasure. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning to you, Leanne. Good morning to the viewers at home. Thank you for having me today.
All right, so the IEC's decision to reopen the candidates' registration or the candidates' list registration process, what do you think of it? Was it expected, or let's get your view on it?
Well, I think it will actually get mixed feelings. But I know the IEC has got a mandate. And the mandate of the IEC is to ensure that they run regular elections. But more importantly, the elections should be free and fair. And if you look at the circumstances that happened in the past few months, there were citizens, and the IEC also confirmed that some citizens couldn't be registered as voters, and that would actually mean that they would be prevented from exercising their democratic right, which has been fought for when democracy was brought into South Africa. So obviously, if now the IEC has to open up the registration for citizens, I think the next step for them would be to say, let's also open up for party candidates or for ordinary candidates to also register. Mm-hmm. The mixed feelings would come in the sense that the other parties had not registered their citizens or their candidates for elections, and it actually created a situation where some parties were saying it's well and enough. It means that those who couldn't meet the deadlines have to be are not supposed to participate in the elections. But at the same time, some of the parties were saying that we've been failed by the processes at the IEC, and that would actually go back to the same IEC to say, if our systems are not properly in place, could we then be able to go out and say, we are actually having credible, free and fair elections? So that is one specific area for me that the IEC has to come out clear and say, indeed, we might have failed citizens with our systems, or what we hear from other political parties might not be the reasoning that they present behind closed doors when they negotiate with the IEC.
We had a conversation in the previous hour with Masutu Moepia. Sakina did have this conversation. In terms of the technical aspect for the registration of the parties, he did say that, you know, as far as they're concerned, there were no technical glitches that the ANC had alluded to. So, you know, that's something that they're saying was not happening. However, their interpretation, and I do stress that it seems to be their interpretation into what the Constitutional Court has said, that they say that if they have opened it up for people to register, they feel the same should be done for political parties. So it's very much so a decision that they have made. It hasn't necessarily come from the Constitutional Court. This is just something that they want to do. But this is also putting a big question mark on the independence of the IEC. Do you think that a reason like this is enough to question the independence of the IEC, or do you think they're very much so within their mandate to do what they're doing?
For those that are opposed to the opening up of registrations, they would actually raise this matter and then continuously do so, because they feel that they've been able to meet all the requirements on time. And if indeed there was nothing untoward coming from the IEC technically, then it means some political parties were negligent. And if you open up the process, it means you're actually favoring those parties. But if also you listen to the other political parties as well, their view would be to say, like what the views that came from the PAC yesterday, their view is that indeed, if you open up for registration, equally you should also do the same with political parties. And that indeed will still require the legal part of it, because the court has not expressed itself on that basis. And of course, Leanne, those that are opposed to the opening up of registration for candidates are actually quite correct in the sense that they were given the timetable, they followed all the processes that were required at the time, and indeed, they did not experience any problem whilst they were actually participating in those processes.
Yeah.
And as for the ANC, it is quite open to all of us that at the time when everybody else was worried about submitting candidate lists, you had members of the ANC who were marching in a number of provinces in South Africa unhappy about the list processes. That might also indicate that maybe at that time, the list of the ruling party was not ready. And of course, those that are for and against would always come with a number of reasons in order to put themselves on a safe side. But indeed, the IEC and the courts must be able to express themselves very clearly so that at the end of the day, when they run these elections, they should actually be declared as credible, free, and indeed fair.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big test of these elections, it really is. But before we move on to the whole idea of these free and fair elections, which, you know, from the beginning have had a question mark on, and we say that due to COVID and other reasons, once a report came through saying that it would be very difficult for them to be free and fair. But I just want to conclude the conversation about the opening up of the registration of candidates with the DA now saying and firmly putting their foot on the ground and saying that they're going to oppose this, the IEC decision to reopen candidate registration for local polls. No doubt the EFF, the IFP also probably going to be going in the same direction. In a court of law, I mean, what chances do they have? Do you think there is still a chance that the ANC are going to miss out and that they will not be able to re-register?
Well, I think firstly, we need to look at the reasoning behind these different political parties. Is that at the time when the Moseneke Commission was brought onto the picture, the IEC has been consistent to say, even if there can be a proposal for a postponement, as the IEC we are quite ready to ensure that we run free and fair elections. It is just that we need a legal requirement so that due to COVID-19 pandemic, we should still be on par in terms of delivering on our mandate. But political parties might require to provide sufficient and very good reasons why they do not need the opening up of a candidate list. But the other question for me, Leanne, would be, will this be necessary for political parties to do so? Because they are actually left with only a month. And instead of them focusing on campaigning and ensuring that they build a strong team for their election campaigns, they might also be bogged on dealing with legal issues, which to them might be necessary, but at the same time, they might also cost them and the energy to deal with election processes. But also, at the same time, when you have the ruling party that is quite in disarray like this one, it also sends a message out to say, if indeed at a party level, the ANC is not organized, who are the people that they send to government to run this government if at a party level the ANC is not organized? Yeah,
and that is a concern that I think a lot of South Africans are voicing at this stage. I want to get back to the issue of a free and fair election because, you know, this is a big concern. As I mentioned earlier, the report, that we did see coming up from the Deputy Chief Justice or former Deputy Chief Justice was saying that, this is not necessarily an environment that is conducive for free and fair elections. Not too much has changed. We're still fighting a pandemic. As it stands right now, with level 3, I'm not sure if the president's going to address us and say, all right, well, we'll open up more. You can sort of have more people gathering. But, political rallies, doing what usually happens during this time has not happened, except for, let's say, something like, those like the DA that are able to try and get their voters on an online platform. But actually going out to stadiums, speaking to people and crowds, that hasn't happened. Now, what in your opinion will this do for electioneering for these particular elections that are not far away at all?
Some political parties that were arguing for the postponement of these elections, in the main, the ANC and the EFF, were arguing and saying that the main component of the elections, which is campaigning, would be affected during the pandemic. And obviously, because that is how they rallied their support, indeed, that is a very valid point. But the difficulty that we have is that nobody is able to predict when are we going to be living with the pandemic, and also at the same time, life has to go on. The IEC has got a constitutional obligation to ensure that they run elections which are free and fair. And maybe this is the time for the IEC and the different political parties to adopt to the new challenges that we're facing today. That due to the pandemic, we need to rearrange how we do our things. And indeed, they can still use all the different methods of communication apart from organizing rallies and filling the stadiums. Another aspect about local government elections is that local government elections are ward-based. So for me, I don't think you need to fill a stadium. You need to field candidates that will be able to run their campaigns in a very small environment or on a ward basis, and they should be able to communicate with each and every person that is based at that ward. You don't need a stadium in a ward that comprises of 4,000 people. And indeed, you also have got social media, other means of communications like the SABC that is available, and I hope the SABC will also give chance to different candidates to campaign. So it is time for political parties to change and adapt to the new challenges that we're actually facing today. Another aspect, Leanne, is that in the course of the pandemic, elections have been run in other parts of Africa and outside the continent. It is possible for elections to run during the pandemic as long as we are able to follow all the necessary protocols and ensure that we don't spread the virus.
Yeah, and that's the key. That is certainly the key, is that you don't want to turn into a super spreader event, but it's one that, South Africans do certainly need to have the right to vote. And I think a lot of South Africans are very happy that these elections are going ahead. And just in terms of the SABC and our involvement, it's one thing that we are very, very cognizant and very serious about, is giving as many parties the say as they can, and that's what we're here for, and we'll continue to do that, and very much so during the run-up to these elections. I want to ask you, are South Africans ready to vote this year? What do you predict in terms of turnout? We do know that local government elections, there generally are a lower amount of people that do come up, but what do you think now, with the political environment we in, so much is happening? What do you think is going to happen?
I think, Leanne, there are a few things that we need to appreciate on the side of government. The awareness relating to issues pertaining to the pandemic, social distancing, the use of masks, and also at the same time, there has been sufficient build-up towards these elections. All these issues that have been raised, they're coming up with the Moseneke Commission, matters going to the Concord, other parties not registering, and now the announcement by the IEC yesterday. All these issues create an environment where there is sufficient awareness about local government elections, irrespective of how these matters came onto the public. And this actually creates an awareness on the part of the political parties to say, whether we like it or not, there is a pronouncement. Another aspect that I think will make these elections exciting is that this announcement is coming when we actually left only with a month. You need all political parties, independent candidates, to bring all the energies in the next 4 weeks. And obviously, they will also be able to rejuvenize the entire society. And I expect to see a lot of people going out to vote. But more importantly, I think young people should be encouraged to go and register on the weekend of the 18th and the 19th so that they actually go and exercise their democratic right. And indeed, that right is to cast a vote and make a difference.
Indeed, that is the most important part of all of this. 23,000 voting stations expected to be open during the registration weekend. So we really do hope that the youth come out in their numbers, because that's where the problem lies, is that we see that the youth don't participate enough in the elections. And we can, to a certain extent, understand, because they seem to be at the brunt end of the fact that, you know, when we look at the unemployed, we look at those that are suffering in South Africa, it is the youth. But this could be an opportunity to change it, and let's hope that it is, Levy. I mean, having the youth coming out, casting their vote, I think that could be a double thumbs up for a good election.
Well, our population is dominated by young people, and these are the people that are required very seriously for the future.
Yeah.
And indeed, they need to play a very significant role in the form of voting, so that they actually, at the end of the day, determine their destiny. But also, more importantly, I would also love to urge tertiary institutions, our universities, our colleges, to actually play a part and encourage students to go register and participate in these elections, because we actually need these young people to shape the direction of our own society. And without them, we really do not have the future. As most people say, the youth is the future, and indeed they need to start now. And that responsibility is to participate in registering and also in vote.
Levy, thanks so much for talking to us. No doubt we'll speak to you more in the run-up to these elections. Levy Ndou is a political analyst talking to us about just issues around elections, but the IEC announcing its amended election timetable and reopening of the candidate list registration process. Quick break, and then